What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and fantasy football drafts at their core are a series of choices. When you're on the clock, the chips are on the table, and the clock hits zero, are you going with player A or player B? And last year, these were decisions like Jonathan Taylor versus Saquon Barkley, Justin Jefferson versus Jamar Chase. Later in your draft, Debo versus Mike Evans, Brian Thomas Jr. versus Keenan Allen, Chase Brown versus Jonathan Brooks. And based on how you decided between those player A versus player B situations determined how well you did in your league. Again, as simple as it sounds, fantasy football really is a game of this or that. So today, we're going to talk through 6 decisions you're going to have to make inside of the top 7 rounds of your draft this summer and talk through who I prefer between player A and player B going around the same draft slot. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new. And the first decision we are going to talk through is in the middle of the second round, Jonathan Taylor versus Bucky Irving. Here, we have Jonathan Taylor below Bucky Irving. I'm taking Bucky Irving ahead of Jonathan Taylor, and here's why. Jonathan Taylor, I think, is fine. He's not somebody that's way down my draft board or somebody I'm not drafting, but he has a big name. He's going in the middle of the second round in your home league. I will say these, the 208 RB9, 209 RB10 here is taken from the consensus default rankings from Sleeper, Yahoo, and ESPN. So in your home league, these guys are going in the mid to late second of drafts. And Jonathan Taylor, again, he's somebody for me that's more of a 2-3 turn pick, and I already have Bucky Irving ranked ahead of him. So I'm really not ending up with a lot of Jonathan Taylor in my drafts, but I am ending up with a lot of Bucky Irving, and here's why. First, Jonathan Taylor was a really weird player last year. He was a legitimately bad pick before the fantasy playoffs. Like, the way that you had to play Jonathan Taylor was sneak him into the playoffs and then come alive. Like, pretty much the rest of your draft had to be perfect so that Jonathan Taylor didn't sink your team. And then if you snuck him into the playoffs, he went absolutely berserk. But before the playoffs, he had a 10-game stretch of 14.2 points per game. And when we look at his underdog advance rate, it's nuts. Weeks 1 through 14 is what this advance rate is. 2 out of 12 teams make the fantasy playoffs. So that is a 16.6% advance rate. He only advanced 10.5% of teams, but he was also on the Best Ball Mania winner on Underdog, winning $1.5 million. So again, it was one of those things where he almost cut your playoff chances in half, but if you got there, he then had 26.1 points per game when it mattered most. Before the fantasy playoffs, though, he was the RB19 in points per game with a worse point per game than Rachaad White and Breece Hall during that stretch. Now, going into this season, he seems like a fine pick. The Colts offensive line is good, but this is the 24th best scoring offense by Vegas. I question the touchdown upside. He's going to always be in the mix to lead the league in rushing, but in terms of touchdown upside, in terms of PPR upside, there are better options on the board. So for me, I'm taking Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving at this point, he is my RB8 to Jonathan Taylor's RB10. After Bucky Irving's Week 11 bye last season, he was the RB6 in points per game with 18.3 points per game. Last year, he was super efficient, 5th in yards per carry, 7th in explosive run rate, 3rd in missed tackles forced per attempt, 4th in yards after contact per attempt, and then he was also top 10 in receptions at running back. And what I think we see here is very similar to what Devon Achane did in his second season. His rookie year, his efficiency, his breakaway run rate, all of that was really, really good. And then he was rewarded in year 2 with a lot more volume. And I think that's what we're going to see for Bucky Irving here in year 2 in a good offense behind a top 5 offensive line. Tristan Wirfs is going to be out early in the year, but by the time you need Bucky to really turn up for fantasy playoffs in the middle of the season push, Tristan Wirfs will be back. And then it's also a top 10 implied scoring offense by Vegas. So it's a great situation, great offensive line. And then also we're already seeing hints of that bell cow usage where in their playoff game versus, I believe, the Washington Commanders last year, 19 of 22 running back touches went to Bucky Irving. And then in the most recent preseason game here, he had 95% of the snaps, 82% of the routes, 20% plus of the targets, 100% of the carries, and then he lined up at wide receiver and caught a touchdown. Now, Rachaad White was hurt. It's also just preseason, but they do like Sean Tucker enough that Sean Tucker should have worked in far more than he did with the starters. I'm not going to tell you that Bucky Irving is going to play 95% of the snaps, but the concerns over him playing, 50% of the snaps, I think are overblown. I think he will be out there as the main back, used in all situations, pass catching, goal line, everything we could possibly want, and it is wheels all the way up for him to kind of join the upper echelon of running backs in the NFL. So for me, he is a target in the middle of the second round, and I am taking him over Jonathan Taylor. Now, the next choice here is in the third round. I have James Cook over JSN. JSN going at the 306 as the wide receiver 14 right now. James Cook at the 311 is the RB 13. I would pull James Cook up to the middle of the third and actually take him there. Now, why I'm not drafting much of JSN in this range is because to me, he is a terrifying pick. You're drafting at wide receiver 14. He was the wide receiver 17 in points per game last year with 14.9 points per game. And I get that he had a year two breakout and he was a good pick where he went, but he also wasn't amazing. Again, he was a fine wide receiver 2. He had 14.9 points per game. A guy like Jerry Jeudy had 14.2. Jacoby Myers had 14.5. This wasn't like a massive smash. And then also when we look at his per route efficiency, it wasn't amazing. He's in this range of like Adam Thielen, Jacoby Myers, Christian Kirk, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, I guess his PFF grade is better than them, but in terms of low 20% targets per out run, right around 9% first downs per out run, below 2 yards per out run isn't very good either. He just wasn't amazing. It was definitely a good year 2 breakout, and there's certainly upside for a massive year 3 breakout here. But the issue for me is that where you're drafting him is it's already expecting him to take another step forward, right? He finished wide receiver 17 last year. You're drafting him wide receiver 14 in round 3 over really good options. And then also the team situation is just brutal. And I find it to be a really tough environment for a real breakout to happen here, where this is a team that is going from last season, 7th in total pass attempts, now projected by Mike Clay with new offensive coordinator Kubiak here, 23rd in pass attempts, 23rd in passing yards, 25th in passing touchdowns. This is a team that's going to want to establish the run and play defense. And then there's also the downside that Sam Darnold gets benched, right? Sam Darnold, everywhere he's gone besides the Vikings, he has gotten benched at a certain point. Even on the Vikings, if they believed in him enough, they would have given him a massive contract. Instead, he goes to the Seahawks. They draft Jalen Milroe. They like Jalen Milroe. If Darnold's not getting the job done, there could be a situation here where when you need JSN the most, week 12 on, week 13 on into the fantasy playoffs, you're dealing with Jalen Milroe at quarterback, which then just nukes JSN. JSN at that point would become a shaky flex option if Milroe ever saw time at quarterback. And then we'll talk about James Cook, who I really like to take. And it's not even so much a James Cook take. It really is a overall philosophy take. And I feel like I reference this every single video. Ryan Heath, Anatomy of a League Winner article over on Fantasy Points, to me, one of the best articles of the entire offseason here. And he looked at the league winner rate over the last 2 years by round. And here you can see the running backs and quarterbacks end up giving you more league winners in round 3 than the wide receivers. Wide receivers rounds 1 through 6 are giving you league winners, or 1 through 5, and the lowest rate is round 3. So for me, this is where I'm going away from wide receiver, going towards running back, going towards quarterback. And for me, I really like what James Cook gives you as a real difference maker, because in your draft, JSN's okay, but he's not much better than guys you can get in rounds 4 through 6, like George Pickens and Xavier Worthy and Tedero McMillan. All those guys will be available later in the third round. If you don't have a second running back or even a first running back, now is the time to take one. And for me, I think James Cook can actually be really good. He was in a weird spot this entire offseason. I have him on about like 8% of my fantasy football teams over on Underdog at this point. And again, it was just weird, right? He's a young ascending player on a good offense, but he had the contract holdout. And now he has officially signed his extension with the Bills. So there's no more weird vibes in the air. He's going to play. There's no more holdout. There's no sketchiness. This is, again, a good player on a good offense. He has now had back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons. He was a top 12 running back in points per game last year, top 10 in missed tackles forced per attempt, yards per carry, rushing yards over expected per attempt. And he's also now heading into year 4, which we've seen be a sweet spot for running back peak seasons. Like, it wouldn't shock me if 2025 was James Cook's best season as a pro. When we step back and look at his entire resume, that this year, right, his 4th season was where he really popped off. Now, I know that his biggest concern at this point is that he was an RB1 in points per game last year with just 50% of the snaps, lowest snap share across all of the top 12 running backs. But it wouldn't be shocking to me, after getting a new contract, after going into year 4, we still see running backs increase their volume. We see them kind of get their money's worth and push them up to 60, 65%. And if that happens, he is then a true league winner. Now, people hold his 18 touchdowns last year against him as he's not going to do it again. He's due for regression. And I guess, but he's still on Las Vegas's number 1 scoring offense. Like, there will be plenty of touchdown opportunities here. And it's very similar to me, like the Eagles, where Jalen Hurts is going to get his touchdowns. Saquon Barkley is going to get his touchdowns. Before that, it was Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders, or Jalen Hurts and DeAndre Swift as well. We just see all the time these teams that are good and score and want to run the ball in the red zone like the Bills do. There's going to be a lot of touchdowns on the table, so I think that it's kind of unfair to James Cook to be like, no, he's not going to have double-digit touchdowns again. To me, I think he will. I think he's going to challenge for 10 to 15 again. He's going to challenge for more receptions this year. If he's on the field more, he's going to be really good. But if not, he's still a guy you're drafting at RB13 with top 10 upside regardless. And then again, if his role was to change or if a Ty Johnson or Ray Davis was to get hurt, all of a sudden James Cook is now a top 5, top 6 kind of option that you drafted in the third round. And again, really good offense, established run, second best offensive line. To me, he's a fine RB1 with legitimate top 5 upside this season. Then we'll talk about our third tough decision here. We actually have a pair of running backs in their fourth year in that same contract, or in that same draft class, I mean. We have Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. Now, this to me in the fourth round of your draft is going to be a crucial running back versus running back decision here. For me, I prefer Kenneth Walker over Breece Hall. Breece Hall at this point is actually a similar bet to James Cook, where James Cook is getting squeezed by Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. You're getting the same thing here with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. And the issue is that he doesn't have the second best offensive line or the first best scoring offense by Vegas. He is on the New York Jets, projected for the 29th points by Vegas. And then you also have just a really nasty rotation. I was drafting Breece Hall a ton early on in the offseason, not thinking that Isaiah Davis would be this involved. I knew Braylon Allen would be involved, and that would be fine, but they're taking Breece Hall out on third down reps for Isaiah Davis. In the most recent preseason game yesterday, they started taking Breece Hall out for Braylon Allen on third downs. And again, if we're not going to get touchdowns, right? We already know that. On the Jets, we're not going to get touchdowns. Justin Fields is there. We need reception upside. And that was kind of the bet, is that after Garrett Wilson, there's nothing here. And Breece Hall could have challenged for 70-plus receptions as the second leading target earner. And now, if he's not going to be out there on clear passing downs, things get really tricky. Now, all of his receiving production has to come on first and second downs, where he's going to be getting taken off the field anyways for Braylon Allen a ton of the time. So for me, it just gets really tough to take Breece Hall over these really good running back profiles like Kenneth Walker in the fourth round. Travion Henderson in the fourth round is even ahead of Breece Hall for me in my rankings. And now we'll talk about Kenneth Walker, who I'm taking firmly ahead of Breece. I'm even pushing him up into the 3-4 turn area if you would like to take him there. Because again, we're drafting the running backs in the third round, not the wide receivers. And I will say that is reflected in my rankings over on the Patreon. Make sure you check out patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It is going to be a link in the description and the top of the comment section down below, where I have my top 200 rankings. They're tiered, my target rounds for every player, my targets, my fades, and it's set up in a way so that you're drafting those running backs and quarterbacks in round 3. You're prioritizing the legendary upside running backs in rounds 1 and 2, and you're hammering those wide receivers through your flex later on in the draft. So again, make sure you check out patreon.com/Ron Stewart. If you have a draft coming up here, it's definitely worth checking out. Now with Kenneth Walker, I just want to swing on the upside here. I know that there is some downside. I know that Zach Charbonnet looked good in this most recent preseason game, and Walker was held out with a foot injury. But Kenneth Walker last year, really good. In terms of like tackle avoiding and breakaway ability, he is one of the best runners in the league. Last year, people do forget, but through weeks 1 through 7, he was the RB2 in points per game ahead of Saquon Barkley. He was the RB7 in points per game before his week 13 injury, and then he got hurt. But he now finds himself in this Kubiak offense for the Seahawks, where we have a really good tweet from Jacob Gibbs that I've been using a lot, where Alvin Kamara is ripping off explosives in this run design early in the season. His explosive rush rate under Kubiak was his highest since 2020. For his career, Walker has averaged 4.4 yards per zone rush compared to 3.8 on non-zone rushes. Then you have, he is at his best on outside zone runs, averaging 4.7 yards. In 2024, Kubiak Saints ranked third with 46% outside zone run rate. For his career, Zach Charbonnet, 3.7 yard average on outside zone runs. On non-zone runs, Charbonnet, 4.4. So it's just a really good marriage of skill set between Kenneth Walker and Kubiak. It seems like they really want Kenneth Walker to be the featured back. It just comes down to if his body will hold up. So I think Charbonnet is a great flyer, not even like a flyer, but just like a fine guy to put on your bench in like round 10, round 9, in case if anything happens to Walker. But at this point, he has been held out with a foot, but it seems like maintenance is what Adam Levitan is saying here. Walker's been dealing with foot soreness and appears to be on a maintenance schedule that sprinkles in days off. He was a full participant in Tuesday's padded practice. So I'm not freaking out on the injury stuff. If you want to say, okay, he's going to be injury prone over the entire year, maybe that's the case with Kenneth Walker. But if he stays healthy this year in this offense, in this system, he is going to be a monster pick in the 4th round of your draft. Then at this 4-5 turn, we're going to talk about Metcalf versus Jalen Waddle. I am taking Jalen Waddle over Metcalf in like that early 5th, late 4th round area of your drafts. Jalen Waddle is somebody that I've wanted to talk about, kind of similar to James Cook, where I've been drafting him, but haven't really planted my flag on him yet this summer of like, this is a guy you need to be drafting. But Jalen Waddle gets a lot of boosts right now at this point in the offseason. You have Tyreek Hill doing Tyreek Hill things. You have Devon Achane going down with a soft tissue injury where who knows what's going on with that. I don't know why I said tissue, but he's going down with a soft tissue injury. And a lot of those Devon Achane targets can get funneled to Jalen Waddle. Jonnu Smith now traded. A lot of those Jonnu Smith targets can get funneled to Jalen Waddle. And Jalen Waddle, to me, is just a good player. I know that it's like crazy to say that because he hasn't been good for a year or so. But if we look at his entire resume of per route data since the 2021 wide receiver class, him versus Devontae Smith and Nico Collins, 2.09 yards per out run is really, really strong. 22% targets per out run is really strong. 10.3% first downs per out run is the highest on this entire list. He paces with Devontae Smith and Nico Collins, 2 highly respected wide receivers in the league. Waddle is really good on a per route basis, and if he stays healthy and he runs a lot of routes this year, this is a passing offense where, again, if Tyreek Hill falls off a cliff this year, if Achane is banged up, all of a sudden he finds himself in a passing offense projected for the 4th most pass attempts as the featured receiver. Like, he has legitimate 100-plus reception upside with real efficiency as a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy, and you can get him as a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 2 type archetype on your team. Now, unlike Metcalf, who finds himself on a really tough passing offense, right? We go from the 4th, projected attempts in terms of Mike Clay. We go down to the 15th, but not even just the 15th. We go down to 24th in passing yards and 26th in passing touchdowns, which is just really tough. I get he'll be the number 1 target, but I'm just not chasing number 1 targets on bad teams. And if I was, you can get Calvin Ridley much cheaper. You can get Jerry Jeudy much cheaper as guys that are very similar bets. When we look at per route for DK Metcalf, unlike Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf last year, these are 2 guys who had brutal quarterback play last year. Michael had been dealing with injury all season. Calvin Ridley, of course, having to deal with Will Levis. And still on a per route basis, they were more efficient than him. Calvin Ridley, a better first downs per out run, better yards per out run. 19.7% targets per out run for DK Metcalf isn't going to cut it. That first down per out run number is brutal compared to what JSN did in that same exact offense. So for me, DK Metcalf in the late 4th is a really tough button to push, and I'd rather just get Jalen Waddle in that same range. Then after that, we have a decision in the 7th round of your drafts. Now, this is going to be a little bit confusing, right, where it says Caleb Johnson, 703 is the RB28, Ricky Pearsall, 806 is the wide receiver 40. But I do want to make sure, and I want to kind of make this clear, and it's the way I have it in my rankings, I have target rounds for every player. I don't want to get caught up in being too cute and waiting to the 8th round to get Ricky Pearsall, waiting to the 9th round to get Emeka Egbuka, because your league mates are definitely going to draft similar to ADP. They're not going to follow it by the book. And you don't want to get caught waiting on Trevion Henderson to come to the 5th round, waiting for Ricky Pearsall to come down to the 8th round. I'm pulling up Ricky Pearsall. I'm drafting him in the early 7th in your home league, and I'm passing on Caleb Johnson for him. Now, with Caleb Johnson, I'm just not big on this offense in general. Again, 26 in scoring. I'm not big on Aaron Rodgers this year. People love the rookie running backs. I love the rookie running backs, right? You got Hampton, Genty, Harvey, Henderson, all of these guys up top. And I think Caleb Johnson gets some of that steam as well as like another really fun rookie running back. And this is a really good class for sure. But to me, he's not on the same level as prospect of guys like Genty, Hampton, Trevion Henderson. He goes in the 3rd round of the NFL draft, and he's in a much worse situation than all of these guys. He's behind Jaylen Warren on the depth chart already. Also with the ones, I believe Kenneth Gainwell came in before him in this last preseason game. So I think that he's pretty buried on this depth chart where you're drafting him in the 7th round as your RB2 thinking you're going to start him in week 1. That's just not really going to be the case. You're going to have to wait a while to actually start Caleb Johnson. Then again, I ask, what do you win when you win, right? Where, again, this is a Steelers offense where he's going to be the between the tackles guy. He's not going to be trusted on passing downs. This is a tweet from Andrew Filipponi here. He's one of the Steelers beat guys, I believe. Caleb Johnson got 0 carries behind the starting Steelers offensive line. Not a good sign. And then below that, there's no way the Steelers are going to trust Caleb Johnson to pass protect or catch the ball out of the backfield. So you are drafting the between the tackles grinder on a slow, bad offense. And it's just not really where I want to go. And on top of that, if you're drafting him for maybe the goal line role, I would just caution you, the way that Aaron Rodgers has operated, he loves to throw the ball on the goal line. He loves to wave off whatever the call is in his helmet, call an audible, and throw a slant to whoever he feels like. And maybe this gives DK Metcalf more touchdown upside, but I would tell you that this was the case, and Garrett Wilson had 7 touchdowns last year. I think that they're not going to be in the inside the 10 area that often, so it doesn't really matter for DK Metcalf's upside, but it takes away a lot of Caleb Johnson's upside, where last year the Jets led the NFL by far in terms of pass rate inside the 10-yard line, doing it 75.4% of the time, and that really hurt Breece Hall, and I think it's going to really hurt Caleb Johnson as well. But on the other side, you have Ricky Pearsall, who is going way slept on in your home league draft, but he is a really fun player. He shined in yesterday's preseason game, and then also he is somebody who I think that you can kind of just throw away his metrics from last year. He was literally shot, I don't know how much clearer that can be. He was shot. It's tough to expect his first downs per out run or yards per out run and all that to look good when he was literally recovering from a bullet wound. Now, we did see him flash that high-end upside of being a true wide receiver last year with 10 targets, 8 catches, 141 yards, and a touchdown in Week 17. He actually won people like millions of dollars in that Week 17 game, I would assume. And then also, when we look past the first downs per run and all of that, and we get more into the nitty-gritty of Matt Harmon looking at reception perception and his per-route win rates, he was only the 58th percentile versus man coverage, but 83rd percentile versus zone and 76th percentile versus press as a rookie receiver is really, really strong. He finds himself in a San Francisco offense projected for the 7th most points by Vegas. And right now, Brandon Ayuk is hurt. Juwan Jennings is like banged up / holding out for a contract. And it's really just him in that wide receiver room. And to me, that's really interesting as a guy you can get in the 7th round of your drafts. And then one more tough decision you're going to have to make in the 7th round. If you miss out on elite tight end early and you're feeling like, oh, maybe I want to get a tight end in the 7th round, I think here I am taking Mark Andrews over Travis Kelce. Mark Andrews, to me, is actually a target for me in drafts, especially with this Isaiah Likely injury, where if he's going to be off the field for the beginning of the season, all of a sudden Mark Andrews is going to be out there for more routes, which was the biggest holdup with him last year. And then he could maybe even extend that lead as a true featured player in this passing offense. Last year, he was still really good per route. He was the tight end 4 in first downs per out run, tight end 6 in yards per out run, tight end 7 in points per game, tight end 17 in targets per out run. He didn't get as many targets as you'd like, but he's definitely more of a big play, touchdown upside style tight end. And then also, you have 5 games of 70% or more of the routes last year. 3 of them came in his final 3 games. He was still recovering from a really weird injury, a cracked fibula. I believe he got in a car crash. People don't talk about it enough. Or no, it wasn't from a car crash. My bad. He got in a game in Week 11, got tightrope surgery, and then was involved in a car crash in the offseason. And the thing is here is that this cracked fibula injury is the same one that zapped Tony Pollard the year that everyone was drafting him inside the top 2 rounds. That completely zapped him. That tightrope surgery is really brutal. And now we have another year removed where Mark Andrews should be healthy. He should be good to go. People like to think of him as like old and washed. He is in year 8 of his career. When we look at David J. Gattiari here, Mark Andrews in year 8 is still expected to produce over 100% of his career baseline. So for a tight end, he's still very much in the prime of his career. He's in a good spot. He's on a good offense. He has tons of touchdown upside, and I think that we're going to see him out there for much more of the routes than we saw last year, especially with the likely injury early on in the year. And on the other side, I'm just not really drafting Travis Kelce. I don't want to be holding the bag on a 36-year-old tight end who's been on the climb. Look at his yards per out run. It went from 2.23 in 2022, 1.92, down to 1.43. I think this is the first time in his entire career he's been under 1.5 yards per out run. I just don't want to be holding the bag when he hits 0. Rashee Rice is going to be more involved in the beginning of the year as well, which I think also hurts Travis Kelce. So for me, in the 7th round of drafts, when he's probably getting drafted more off of name value than what he's doing on the field, I would just rather pass on Travis Kelce altogether. Now, that is going to do it for us today. As always, if you have a draft coming up and you want to make sure that when you're on the clock for these crucial decisions, you don't mess it up, I have all of these reflected in the rankings. You have my targets, my fades, my top 200, my target rounds, my tiers. You can check off every single player as you go. And it's the same ranking set that I use in all of my drafts when we do these high stakes streams every single night of the season from now until week 1. But if you can't support there, just leave a like on the video. I appreciate it a ton, and I will see y'all in the next one.
This sounds like VVS stones, like this froze. I used